Welcome back. This time I have a game that's part of the Lage Landen Liga, which roughly translates into the Dutch league. So this is a next tournament that's going to be played over, most part of the upcoming year actually. So the concept is that, you can also see it in the comments, some links to the rules pack and stuff. But the concept is that over the couple of upcoming months, we're going to play one-on-one at people's homes, and it's going to be a knockout tournament. So in the first round we have a pool system where which allows everyone to basically participate in 3 matches. After these 3 matches, 16 highest scoring people are going to go through, and then we have 8 matches, and then these 8 matches they decide who's going to go and progress to the next round. And with 8 people you're going to play 4 matches, then you go to the semi-finals and then to the finals to eventually end up with 1 winner. This is the army list that I selected for this league. So during this part of the year, we're not gonna be able to change this army list, and we're gonna also use the rules as they are set to stone right now. So what kind of list did I take? I took a Vampire Covenant Zombie Dragon list. Why did I take this list? So my thought was that a lot of people were gonna go for quite safe choices in terms of lists, basically, and not a lot of extremes. And I think the Zombie Dragon fits into that quite well. So the only thing I would be worried about is a lot of shooting that and magic combination, basically, that is able to take down the Zombie Dragon very swiftly. But otherwise, I think it's a very potent list. Mostly also because if the matchup is not that good for me, I can still try to go for a small win through the Occultism Wizardmaster and Avocation Wizardmaster together. Because I have the potential to take Marked for Doom, Touch of the Reaper and Hasten the Hour together, which enables me to, over the course of a game, snipe out important characters in the opponent's army, boosting my points. And Vampire Covenant is known for just being able to resist, build to last. So yeah, I am spoiling a little bit my tactics here. So I am spilling my beans for my opponents. So if you're an upcoming opponent of me, please don't listen to this video any further. No, I'm just kidding. So what else do I have? I have some skeletons to fill up my core. I have some Baronites to take away some duels in combats where the Zombie Dragon might get engaged. Some Spectral Hunters and Phantom Hosts to just annoy my opponent if he doesn't have any magical attacks mostly. And the Winged Reapers to do nearly most of the dirty work. So it is a dedicated combat unit, but it's actually not that hard as a combat unit if you are going to throw it into really dedicated combat units like 40 Feral Orcs or something. But yeah, we'll see what's gonna happen. So the general idea I have behind this list is that the mobility is mostly gonna be a big part of the success of the list. So I have a Zombie Dragon General, which boosts my Inspiring Presence also to 18 inches. Von Karstein gives you an extra 6, so I have a 24-inch bubble that allows me to march. And then the Baronites are quite mobile. The Spectral Hunters are quite mobile, the Winged Reapers. So I think it's going to be an army that really surprises people in terms of its mobility. And then the combination of Stormcaller with the Winged Reapers enables me to be safe from most enemy shooting with the Zombie Dragon. Because I can just put it behind the Winged Reapers, I'm going to have soft cover from most ranged output models. And I have the hard target 1, it's going to be long range properly, so you're looking at a -3 to get hit before you factor in some terrain. So then let's go to the list of my opponents. So this is the first draw for me was Infernal Dwarves. So this is an army that a friend of mine plays, and he's been playing this for some time now. And I've also learned a bit how his army works, so it does quite heavily rely the first couple of turns of the game on the rocket batteries, the bolt throwers, and the wizard master and apprentice. And then once you come closer, the infernal warriors with the blunderbusses can really put out some damage against non-target targets. And the Targ Anointed and Kandim Incarnate will always be a very, very scary dedicated close combat unit. So the things I'm most afraid of in this list are the Targ Anointed and the Kandim Incarnate. And the rocket batteries don't worry me too much, because most targets they can shoot at. Well, I can keep my zombie dragon close, and then on long range they're gonna hit me on 6+ with a hard target. So that would be fine. And then the Wizard Master with Alchemy, yeah, Silver Spike is always a bit annoying, but he doesn't have the potential to do so many wounds during one single turn of the game that I will lose my Zombie Dragon probably. So I was quite confident going into this match, also because the bolt throwers, they won't hit me most likely, so... Then we go into the battle. So we're playing Dawn Assault and Hold the Ground. So this is according to the information that we got from the tournament organization. My opponent was able to choose table sites on a map that was also provided by the organization. And then I was able to just drop everything to go first, because while my opponent is playing a bit of a gun line, as you can see, and I thought it would be highly advantageous to be able to put pressure on my opponent in the first turn and put my scoring units closer to the center. So the matchup also kind of dictates that the scenario is going to be quite a bit easier for me to score than my opponent, partly due to the nature of his list and partly due to the fact that Vampire Covenant always has already a bit of an advantage in Hold the Ground, as your units, they don't really break that quickly, and like these blocks of skeletons, you can position them somewhere and they'll just act like an anvil, so you can be pretty sure that your anvils are gonna last for a couple of turns at least, whilst your opponent is not that sure about his scoring units most of the time. So let's talk a bit about my deployment. So I kind of knew that my opponent was gonna go either into the left corner or in the middle of the field. So as you can see, I have my skeletons on the left side of the lake in the middle. So the objective is indicated by the white marker in the middle of the table, and my skeletons are going to be able to get there quite quickly. So my front unit of skeletons closer to the lake is the one with the banner of the Relentless Company. I was figuring that if my opponent was going for a very aggressive deployment, I could still get there within 2 turns, or I could also use my banner to march them up very quickly one time. And otherwise I have the direwolves that can vanguard up pretty easily and then do a full move. As you can see that I did now to just advance to his war machines. I was expecting his war machines to be all the way on the left side of the table, to be honest, because in the situations where they are quite unprotected. But well, my opponent elected to put them where they are, and I'm quite fine with that. So he is using his Infernal Engine to protect his flank, and yeah, it's a funny thing because it cannot charge any units that are beyond its front facing, unlike the Empire Steam Tank. And the Empire Steam Tank is a very good element to protect your flank, but this one, as it can only charge forward really, it's less well suited as a flank protector. So what you can do with the Empire Steam Tank is that you just put a bit of a chaff unit besides it, and then your opponent has either the choice of going into the chaff unit or trying to go around it. And of course there's sacrifice your chaff unit, but it does enable your other units to just pass the Steam Tank without any trouble, because it cannot overrun or push you. So yeah, this is my first turn move basically. So I think I might have been a bit too aggressive with the dire wolves because I don't have anything that follows up their aggressive move after this initial deploy. So maybe I should have held them back behind the wall that you can see in the middle of the board, and then I could have gotten a charge of my opponent's infernal engine. But in the position where I am now, I do threaten his war machines, and even if I get like 3 wolves into combat, or 1 wolf for that matter, with a hobgoblin bolt thrower, and if I'm able to cast an arise on the wolves, then I'm gonna get back. I don't know exactly how many wolves, but it's like d6 plus 2 or so. So it might very well be that nearly the entire unit is gonna be back then. And that is gonna do enough damage probably to wipe out one of these bolt throwers, be able to overrun in some other stuff, and remove them effectively from the field. So this first turn pressure really puts on the pressure for my opponent to remove these wolves as fast as possible with his ranged output, which draws away the focus from the rest of my list. So I'm still undecided on whether this was the good move to do. The only thing is that it also, in this way, the wolves provide cover for the rest of my army. And yeah, the rest of the army is just holding back at this moment. So I do know that my opponent has some fearsome Tarok and Kadims. So my goal for the first turns of the game was to basically just snipe off one of these Kadims, one of these Taroks, I mean. And yeah, I would have rather just sniped off his Wizard Master, but he was hiding it all the way in the back next to the Titan Mortar. Below the ruins, so that was a bit far away for my zombie dragon and my caster to get to. So I'm also happy with the second option of trying to charge or trying to snipe down one of these Torug. Yeah, so then we have the opponent's turn, and you could already see it unravel. So he's trying to chaff me up with this Hobgoblin Wolf Riders. And his demon engine just comes forward, and he basically, in his movement phase, he seems to ignore the wolves. But then in the shooting and the magic phase, he's going to focus on them a bit more. So there's this thing what he did with the Hobgoblin Wolf Riders, and I don't actually mind it that much, because he got his own Torok anointed that want to probably charge out of the ruins at some point. But as long as the Hobgoblin Wolf Riders are in front of my skeletons, he cannot charge into my skeletons. So either I have to give him a charge that frees up his Hobgoblin Wolf Riders for him to be able to charge into another target, or my units are going to be protected from charges for 1 round. And the only mistake that I realized that the clear mistake that I made is the one on the top left with the Phantom Host on the hill. So the Kadims were already going there in that corner of the field, and they just had to advance quite naturally to threaten my Phantom Hosts, and my Phantom Hosts were too far up on the hill to be able to sneak back behind the hill again. Yeah, so combat and shooting and magic sees my dire wolves being completely eliminated. So the last shot he did was one of the bolt throwers that shot off the last remaining wolf. So if this hadn't happened, I would have been very happy, because then I could have just charged into a Hobgoblin bolt thrower, as said earlier, and then the zombie dragon would probably have been able to get within 18 inches and cast or rise back some dire wolves. But this way, as you can see, I can also just take advantage of the fact that the Infernal Engine came towards me. I have a unit of zombies that I summoned the previous round that I can use to chaff it up for 1 turn. And yeah, as mentioned, as it cannot charge anything beyond its front arc, the Spectral Hunters and the Black Knights, they are, or the Baronites, they're very able to go beyond the Infernal Engine and threaten his backline already in the second turn of the game. And his Torag Anointed, they are not able to countercharge into my Spectral Hunters. So also, if they were to charge into the Spectral Hunters, I don't know how much of a good matchup that would be for him. Obviously, my Spectral Hunters are gonna get some damage being dealt to them. But on the other hand, I was quite confident that I would be able to remove a couple of wounds from the Torag at least this turn. And then if he charges in, he has, let me see, he has paired weapons on them, so he has 12 attacks that hit on a 3+ normally, and a wound on a 2+, so that's like 6 wounds. And that's gonna be like 2 wounds after the the Aegis save. And then I strike back with, as I am 8 white then left, with 16 attacks, hitting on 4+, wounding on 4+. So that's also going to be 4 wounds. So actually it's going to, in the grind, I'm going to grind them down, I think. With just the 10 fast cavalry kind of guys. So these units are interesting units for sure. So if they have the right matchup, they can actually dish out quite a lot of damage. Yeah, so what else? So I left his Hobgoblin Wolf Rider unit, and indeed I did manage to take off one of the Daruk. So this makes this unit way less threatening than it was before. And I left him a charge onto the flank of a Phantom Host, but it still clogs up his own lines. So if he goes in there, then probably the Daruk, they can charge into my infantry. My infantry block that's a bit more forward, but due to the length of the hobgoblins, he probably won't be able to make contact with all of his Torag. I think like probably even just one. As I have 3 ranks, a Legion Standard, the banner. I already have a static combat res of 5. It's not going to be a good trade for him, so it's going to be quite on the edge of whether he will be able to win the combat even at all, and then it's not worth it for him to go into this unit. Yeah, so in his second turn he actually decides not to charge with anything, I believe, except for the Kadim Incarnates on the left that charge into the Phantom Host that I try to use to block the advance of my opponent's Infernal Warriors. Yeah, this is a situation where where I would have preferred 2D terrain actually. So I'm gonna make a promise to myself to make some cutouts for the terrain pieces that we use here, to put them underneath and then remove the terrain piece whenever you need some units moving over it. Because in this case, I think the Infernal Dwarves would not have been able to finish the move outside of half an inch of my Phantom Host and the Torag Anointed that are on the right side of them. The terrain makes it a bit fiddly, but still it seems like a courageous move. Anyway, yeah, so we continue, and we also measure out some distances before he finishes his moves. So to me at least, most important distances were the distance between the Skeleton Warriors and the Infernal Dwarves, which is like, I thought it was just 10 inches, because then he gets to shoot at my target. And the distance between my Winged Reapers and his Torag Anointed in the ruins is 16 inches. So we measured it out and agreed on this. And then we continued with the rest of the battle. So he still has a lot of shooting output, but the funny thing is that the Zombie Dragon with Stormcaller has a 12-inch bubble hard target. So the Spectral Hunters in front are also still benefiting from this hard target, making it actually quite a hard target to shoot at indeed. So the Hobgoblin Bolt Throwers, they normally hit on a 4+, now they're hitting on a 5+. The Titan Mortars, they're volley guns, so if they have a low amount of shots, they hit on a 5+. If they get a high amount of shots, including a 6, they have a -1 to hit, so they only hit on a 6+. So the shooting is really effectively neutered by this hard target bubble, which is great for me, not for my opponent. So my opponent was quite annoyed at the fact that this is like a 90-point item in the Vampire Count roster, because he thought that it should be actually way more expensive. Then again, I think he didn't really consider the fact that you have to build a Karnstein list in order to do this. So compared to an independent Vampire Count list, your core limit goes up by 5%. So that means another 225 points spent on core. Which, well, core troops are still troops, so they're still quite decent sometimes. But it's more than it's a bigger sacrifice than just paying 90 points for an item that gives you a 12-inch distracting bubble. And I think it's also an item that only works in specific armies. But I think the Zombie Dragon army is certainly one of the armies that really benefits from having hard target on your Zombie Dragon and in the surroundings of your Zombie Dragon, of course. Yeah, so then we go to our second turn. So my opponent did a lot of he shot a lot at my hard targeted Spectral Hunters, and yeah, he admitted after the battle the mistake of not shooting at the Barrow Knights on the right. So in my turn, my Barrow Knights can easily charge into his War Machine, and the Spectral Hunters, they're gonna go into the Hobgoblins. So I am forcing my opponent to take a terror test, but unfortunately he makes it. And then the rest of the line, yeah, I also have a charge with the Winged Reapers onto the Torag Anointed. So this is a charge for which I have to roll a 10, and I luckily make it. So the thing is that I was looking into this, and my considerations were that if I had a failed charge, I was just gonna stick more or less where I was and not change the distance between my opponent and me. And if I was going to have to charge, I was going to be able to remove one of the most threatening blocks of my opponent from the game, because I'm going to strike first. There's only 3 Torag Anointed left, so probably I will kill one of them. He's going to strike back, and he might kill one of my Winged Reapers, but it's going to be dicey whether he will stick or not. If he doesn't stick, I have some chances of catching him and overrunning into the bunker with the Wizard Master. And if I do so, then I'm very happy, because then I can just knock out this general, which is obviously a good thing. So my opponent wasn't very happy about this encounter. And then in the Magic phase, I also got Spectral Blades onto the Winged Reapers. So this was really a decisive point in my mind in the battle. And otherwise, I'm just reorganizing my lines basically. So I am getting rid of the Hobgoblin Wolf Riders with my Phantom Host. I am still preventing my opponent's Infernal Engine from getting to my juicy targets with the zombies that I raised before. And I am quite confident with the Barrow Knights all the way on the bottom in removing the War Machines. So I would say that even though it seems like maybe a little bit of a careful approach to the Dwarven Infernal Dwarf lines, it felt like a really safe approach. So I didn't want to take too many risks, because I'm still playing against the gun line with an Pyromancy or Alchemy Mage in this case. So with some unlucky die rolls, I'm not going to be able to stop both his Silver Spike and the Quicksilver Lash. And if they both are being cast onto my dragon, then they can put on something like 4 wounds or so, and then combined with the artillery that might just get the lucky shot, he could very well be able to remove my dragon from the table. And if that happens without me having some guarantees of doing some real damage to his list, it's gonna be bad for me. So what happens in combat? The Winged Reapers, they went into the Torag Anointed, and they actually managed to kill off 2 of the Torag Anointed, mostly due to Spectral Blade. and then they go for the overrun and they get a 5 on the dice, so they just don't make it into his wizard bunker, and that was something I was really bummed out about. And then otherwise the Baronites, they go to town on the rocket artillery, and they overrun into his engineer on the bottom. And the Spectral Hunters, they just mow down some of the Hobgoblins. But I was a bit disappointed with the Spectral Hunters against the Hobgoblins, because I was imagining that my opponent might just fail his fear test. But I kind of forgot that he still has the Discipline 9 of his general nearby. So I'm discovering that Hobgoblins are not the best target for Spectral Hunters. Because you just still hit them on a 4+, and you do wound them on a 2+. But yeah, it doesn't really make sense to use a AP10 unit on such a target as Hobgoblins. So yeah, the matchup with the Target Anointed would have been better for these guys. So my opponent's turn, he charges in with his Kadims into my Skeletons. I was quite surprised by this, because I would have thought that it would have been more valuable for him to use the Kadims to prevent me from going through his lines, as I am doing right now. But apparently he valued it more to go into my Skeletons, and they are 5 Kadims, so they can dish out quite some damage. But I do have my other block of Skeletons ready to go for the counter charge, together with the Zombie Dragon, who can just fly over and go corner to corner on either side of the Skeletons. So I was really surprised by this charge of my opponent, because it's going to be quite certain that my Skeletons will at least survive 1 round of combat. Yeah, so then we go to, what else he did is that his Infernal Dwarves in the ruins, they turned around to face the Winged Reaper. So my Winged Reaper is very close to these Infernal Dwarves. And the Infernal Dwarves do have their blunderbusses, and they do also have a lot of ranks in the unit, so every single hit that they make actually is going to be 2 hits onto the Winged Reapers. The shooting is strength 5 with AP 0, but the Winged Reapers only have a 5+ armor save. So they're kind of like nearly the ideal target for these blunderbusses, because every wound that you take off is a very valuable wound on this unit. So he manages to knock off a Winged Reaper. So we only have 1 model left with 4 wounds. But yeah, it's still a Winged Reaper. So my opponent also tried to rally his Target Anointed, but as it was only 1 model left, he was at 25% of his original wounds, so he would only rally on a 5, and he didn't manage to rally them. So they are forever gone, and for that I was really grateful. Then in combat something magically happens. So my opponent gets a swing with his Hobgoblins against my Spectral Hunters, and through all the attacks he makes something like 6 or 8 wounds. I fail 4 Aegis saves, so I actually have 4 less Spectral Hunters in the combat, so my remaining 2 Spectral Hunters, they do their best, but they just can't do sufficient to take care of the Hobgoblins. And yeah, then we go to my turn again, basically. So I do have the zombies still that my opponent still didn't get rid of, and I'm very grateful for that, because I can just use them to clean up his Hobgoblin Wolf Riders that rallied. And yeah, we're measuring this out just to make it a fair play. And well, meanwhile the Black Knights, they already went through his engineer the previous turn, and now they're on to the next war machine. The Winged Reaper charges into the other rocket artillery, and this is really where you see where the flywheel on this model, on such a combat unit, shines. Because I only have 1 model left, but it still hits hard enough to deal with the Titan mortar, or with the rocket artillery. Sorry. And as I mentioned, above in the field, my opponent was able to knock down, let me see, something like 30 skeletons or so. So that was quite insane. So I only have 9 skeletons left in the front unit, but then I could countercharge with dragon and skeletons to the side of his unit. So I was counting this out before I did it, because my opponent is still going to be able to strike first with his Kadeems onto my skeletons before the skeletons get to strike, and the zombie dragon. So the vampire count is able to strike first. He might kill one of the Kadeems entirely, but if he doesn't, my opponent's going to have 15 attacks now with battle focus onto the skeletons. So if there were more than 9 skeletons left, then it could be a problem, because the combat res I'm bringing is 1 for the Karnstein vampire, 1 for the charges too. Then I have a charge in the flank, and it's a big flank, so that's another 2, so I get to 4. I have 3 ranks in my skeleton unit, but I have a Legion standard, so I go to 4. So that's another 4, it's 8, and I have a banner in my skeleton unit, so I go to a total of 9 static combat res. I have 9 skeletons in the unit in front of his Kadeems, so that is the kind of buffer that I have for him to wreck. And then afterwards just comes the damage output of the vampire count and the dragon and the breath weapon on the dragon, and the attacks of the skeletons against his attacks onto my skeletons on the side, basically. So, having calculated that out a little bit in my head, I was quite confident of just putting this vampire dragon in, the zombie dragon. Because sometimes you have these matchups where you're quite confident about them, but then in the end you start calculating and you're like, oh shit, I shouldn't do this. Because every wound that you lose combat by is a very, very tough wound to lose on a model such as a zombie dragon. So the only thing I was still worried about, genuinely worried about, is the Infernal Engine of my opponent. So if he's going to be able to charge into my zombie dragon, I'm not sure what would happen. So I did have my Cursed Medallion at the start of the game, and at the start of the game I actually elected his Torag Anointed champion, so that I could... well, basically it's an interesting pick, I thought, because with reroll to hit and reroll to wound against this Torag Anointed champion, I would be sure to do like 6 wounds or 7 wounds onto his champion, and then if he charges me, I can challenge, and then he can also decline the challenge if he wants to. But still I have reroll to hit, reroll to wound onto his champion, so I can divert 3 attacks of my Vampire Lord onto the champion, the rest onto the unit, see what happens, and possibly also just do the 1 extra wound needed with my zombie dragon onto the champion. But it ensures to have sufficient static combat res, or well, active combat res against this unit, were it ever to charge into my zombie dragon. Whilst with the Infernal Engine, I just don't want to have it near my dragon at all anyway, because I have just a defensive for 4 with distracting, which is a very big advantage of the zombie dragon. My opponent has d6 plus 1 impact hits at strength 6 or 3d3 grinds. I could imagine that if I fly into his engine and I don't, well, I'm not going to kill it, he's going to do a couple of wounds to me next turn. He could do the remaining wounds needed to bring my dragon down, and that would be a very unfavorable matchup. So I would have, I would need for him to charge into my dragon, which is a dicey situation, because he has to charge, then he's going to do some wounds. I'm going to have to do more wounds than or well, at least equal wounds to him, because I do have a Karnstein dragon, so I do have 1 combat res, 1 static combat res, but yeah, if he charges in, it might just happen so that he just kills the dragon. It is entirely possible. So this is just a risk that I didn't really want to take, because it's, for him it's like a 300 or 400 point model. For me it's if I lose it, it's 1300 points to the opponent. So meanwhile, my Baronites were able to remove another Hobgoblin bolt thrower from the field, and the Winged Reaper that charged into the rocket artillery actually managed to go through and come into the rear of my opponent's Hobgoblins. And then in the following combat turn, they were able to just mop up the Hobgoblins, all while killing so many of them that they needed a very bad break test, and they didn't manage to make it anymore. So my Winged Reaper could overrun to come back to my lines to get healed again. And the Black Knights or the Baronites, they could continue to yet another war machine. And then at this point of the game, I was looking at the table, at the board state, and basically my opponent still has his Infernal Engine, who's locked in combat with my Phantom Host. He has his big block of Dwarven Warriors, and he has his Wizard Master in a block of Hobgoblins. Whilst I basically have my entire army left, except for the Spectral Hunters and the Direwolves, and half of the Winged Reapers, and 1 unit of Skeletons. I could still get back some of these Winged Reapers and still some of the Skeletons. So then I would only have lost my Spectral Hunters and the Direwolves, which would bring me to a big win. At this point of the game, I could still try to go into the Infernal Warriors with my Zombie Dragon with a unit of Skeletons. And I think that the odds would be highly in my favor in this matchup. Because I also do have the ranks to break my opponent. I do have a lot of static combat res. And the attacks of the Vampire Lord do really outshine the attacks of my opponent's dwarves. But on the other hand, it's a risk that I didn't really want to take, because my in the previous round my dragon actually took a couple of wounds from his magic and from his blunderbusses, so I believe that at the start of the turn he was at 3 wounds. If my opponent does manage to put another 3 wounds on, it's just game over for him. For my dragon, I mean. And going for these warriors would mean that my skeletons would have to advance up. The zombie dragon would have to go to a spot where they would threaten his warriors. And I would have to survive both a round of shooting of my opponent and a round where he would stand and shoot. Unless I would come close enough for him to charge, but in that case he's gonna probably charge my dragon and then try to win it on static combat res, because I don't have too much of that, just on the dragon. Yeah, so I just went for the safe play because I already figured that I had most of the points in the game, and I had the objective also. So I chose for the option of just consolidating my lines and just holding on to the points that I had, even with the promise of getting the Winged Reaper back into action. Yeah, and I also discovered during this battle that Baronites are actually really good at mopping up war machines. So they do have multiple wounds against standard size models, and war machines are one of the standard size models that have a lot of wounds. So if you charge in, war machines normally have a defensive of 1. So you're hitting with, in the formation that I run them, with the champion with 6 attacks, you hit on 3+, you have strength 6, so you wound on a 2+. There's likely going to be like 3 wounds, and these 3 wounds, they just get multiplied into 6 wounds, and you remove an entire war machine a turn. And then even if you fluff your dice, which also happened quite regularly, where I just did 1 wound on war machine that multiplies into 2 wounds, you have a charge, your opponent doesn't do anything back, so they lose by 3. They fail the break test, and the war machine still pops. So they're really effective at removing war machines, way more so than I had expected. Yeah, so then we go basically to the last turns of the game. I consolidate even further, and I managed to grow back my skeletons to a size where they are above 25%. I also do manage to extract my unit of Baronites that was in between his lines, and the Winged Reaper is going back to town a little bit to try to get healed up, but I don't manage to get a spell through to heal him up to get above 25%. My opponent in the last turn, he just focuses on removing the Black Knights in the middle of the field from the field, but he just doesn't manage entirely, so there's one Black Knight remaining, giving him only half points for this unit. So in the end, we tally up the points, and it's based on points, it's a 14-6 in my favor. And then after the secondary objective that I won by being in the middle of the board, it turns into a 17-3. So this is the first game that I had to play for this ranking. I'm very happy it turned out to be a 17-3 in my favor, because my other two members of the pool, they played against each other and they got a 12-8. So with that regard, I am a little bit ahead of my opponents. And the next, the other two opponents I still have to play. They play a Dwarvenhold gun line and a Vermin Swarm gun line. So I don't know who came up with this sudden increase of gun lines all over the field, but I am really happy that I got Stormcaller on my Zombie Dragon, even though it's not going to help at all against the Vermin Swarm gun line with all the naphtha launchers that ignore hard target and soft cover. But anyway, we'll just look what happens in the matchup, and I'll be updating you guys with the matches. It's going to be probably March only that we play the matches, but once they have been played, you will certainly be notified. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.